Welcome back to Diplomatic Channel. 60 years ago, on March 25th, the leaders of Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands and West Germany signed the official treaty establishing the European Economic Community in Rome, Italy. The document came into force on January 1st, 1958. It established a common market where people, goods, services and capital can move freely and created the conditions for prosperity and stability for European citizens. It laid the foundation for what we now know as the European Union, ushering in the longest period of peace in written history in Europe. The now 28-member state union has 140 delegations throughout the world, Nigeria inclusive. In fact, 20 of those member states are accredited in Nigeria. The delegation to Nigeria is also the delegation to ECOWAS, led by Ambassador Michel Arion, who led celebrations of the union's existence a while ago in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. What started as the dream of a few has become the hope of many. 60 years ago, while recovering from the tragedy of 2 world wars, a few leaders in Europe decided to bond together and rebuild the continent from its ashes. According to its leaders, the European Union has become one with common institutions and strong values, a community of peace, freedom, democracy, human rights and the rule of law, a major economic power with unparalleled levels of social protection and welfare. Values that have been threatened by political and economic events in the last 2 years, as acknowledged by the head of the EU delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Ambassador Michel Arion, who also says that hope is rising.
You are very right that we went through difficult times the last 2 years with the resurgence of nationalist parties, people who were not believing in Europe anymore. And I'm not referring necessarily to extreme right or extreme left parties, even I would say the left and the right sometimes could criticize the EU for lack of results, also because we suffered a lot from the financial and the economic crisis from 2008 until 2014, and the EU could not probably manage to give hope to a lot of people that growth will come back.
The 60th anniversary celebrations may have been low-key in Europe because of certain events that have taken place. One of which is Brexit, which shook the Union with the triggering of Article 50. But there is no dampener on the mood tonight, as representatives of the European Union countries, the EU delegation, members of the diplomatic corps, and friends of the European Union gather tonight for the landmark anniversary. The election in France, which produced Emmanuel Macron as president, saw the 2 leading candidates promising to push for reform in the Union, warning that deeper cracks could result from the Brexit. While the Union's leaders have always portrayed a position of strength and called for greater unity, Ambassador Arion says indeed certain things could be done differently.
People are focusing on the failures and the weaknesses and not enough on the achievements. And by far, the achievements are much bigger than the failures. That is that, communication, awareness raising, education. So we have to be much better in our public diplomacy, I would say. And that is true for Europe, but it's true also for the national governments. You know, when the national government is experiencing a difficulty, it's because of Europe. If they achieve something, it's their own success.
The EU delegation in Nigeria provides assistance for a number of projects in humanitarian aid and the fight against terrorism. It does this through the European Development Fund, which has allocated 512 million euros to Nigeria for the period 2014 to 2020. The fund focuses on 3 priority areas: social, which includes improving access to quality primary health care, economic and governance, with continued support for the strengthening of democracy in Nigeria. Here are other discussions in diplomatic circles.
North Korea has defied international calls to stop its nuclear program once again by test-firing a ballistic missile from Kaesong, northwest of the capital Pyongyang. The test has been condemned by neighbors South Korea and Japan, which said the missile flew for about 30 minutes before landing in the Sea of Japan. North Korea has conducted 5 nuclear tests despite UN sanctions and is also developing long-range missiles. The military is reported to be continuing efforts to miniaturize nuclear warheads and fit them on missiles capable of reaching the United States. The US, on the other hand, has accused the UN Security Council members of standing idly by and not enforcing sanctions against North Korea. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has praised China as a strong pillar to an open world and a leading contributor to globalization through its hosting of the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. He said this after a meeting with the country's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He said the Belt and Road Initiative will steer economic globalization towards a more balanced, inclusive and harmonious development.
I consider it to be an extremely important initiative. We have the objective of a globalized world. We want globalization to move ahead, but we want to be fair. We want to be just. And the Belt and Road Initiative can be a very important contribution for a fair and effective globalization.
And that the initiative is a key contribution to addressing global problems through international cooperation. He also said the UN will work closely with China to help developing countries achieve faster growth and meet the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
Well, the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda is a universal agenda, and it's an inclusive agenda. It means all of us, all of humanity. So it's very much in line with President Xi's concept, which was given at his speech in Geneva, about building a shared community. So the Belt and Road Initiative is about sharing in development, about common responsibilities for environment and so on.
France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, begins his presidency with a willing partner in Europe wanting close relations to help shape European policy. The offer is being made by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who says she'll do everything not only to help France, but also to shape the European path with France. Macron holds talks with Merkel in Berlin on Monday, a day after his inauguration, with the aim of stressing the importance of the relationship with Germany to relaunching the European project. The United Nations says war and famine have forced more than 2 million children in South Sudan to seek refuge away from home. It says more than 1 million children have fled the country, while another 1 million are internally displaced. Civil war in the oil-producing country began when President Salva Kiir fired his deputy Riek Machar in 2013, 2 years after the country won independence from neighboring Sudan. The fighting has split the country along ethnic lines, spurred hyperinflation, and plunged parts of the nation into famine, creating Africa's biggest refugee crisis since the Rwandan genocide in 1994. Aid agencies say more than 1,000 children have been killed in the fighting, but the figure could be higher since there are no accurate death tolls available for South Sudan.
And that's the program this week. Remember, you can reach us on any of our Twitter handles, @DiplomaticChan and @Amarachi_Ubani. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.